like you to think about that as you think about a gentleman who has a very active ministry, and it's also local. He'll tell you more about it. But I think Rusty Boruff will have certainly a message that will have something to do with renewal and possibly something better. Rusty.
Thank you. That was very kind. It's good to be here. I know some of you guys have heard about 180 and what we do as an organization, and I'm going to tell you just a little bit about 180, and then I mostly want to talk about why we exist as an organization, which goes really well into that word renewal, and a little bit about how it got started as an organization, and even how you can get involved. But first of all, I want to thank Carolyn and Denny for inviting me, and they are my neighbors, so that's kind of how I ended up here. And also thank you for your prayers for my stroke. And I know many of you guys actually were praying for me, even though you may not have knew who I was. And so I really do appreciate that. I happened to, it was 53 days ago, I happened to be on the golf course with a pastor friend of mine and 2 staff members getting ready for our 180 golf outing. And I had swung the club, felt like a pinched nerve, and ended up being torn artery in my neck, which caused a blood clot that ended up going to my brain. And within 15 minutes, I couldn't talk, I couldn't swallow, my arms, all my limbs were out like this, and they were going to life flight me to Iowa City. But by the time I got to the hospital locally here, a lot of my movement came back. And I ended up in Iowa City, where I would spend 3 days, I believe. And within 24 hours of being in the neuro ICU unit, I was able to walk around, and I had full movement back. And I don't throw that word miracle around lightly, but there's no question to me that was a miracle. Even the doctors in Iowa City had a really difficult time explaining it, and one of them used the word miracle, that I recovered so quickly from that stroke. And I know that it was because of all the people praying for me, and many people who didn't even know me, like yourselves, who are praying for me. So thank you so much for that, and I am feeling much better. I have some energy issues, not quite there yet, some memory stuff, but I'm a lot better than I should be. So thank you again for your prayers and continued prayers on that. Now, you didn't come to listen to me talk about my stroke. So a little bit about 180, and like I said, I'm going to just kind of give you a brief overview of what 180 is, and then I really want to focus on why we exist. When you break down 180 as an organization, it comes down to 3 things: prevent, reach, and develop. Prevent is all our school-based initiatives, working specifically with schools that are low income and high poverty rates. When you look at some of the reasons why we see generational poverty in our community, a big reason is because of the opportunity gap, is what I call it. When you look, I grew up in Aledo, Illinois. You want to know where Aledo is? All right. So I grew up in Aledo, Illinois, small town. In my town, where it's basically middle class, what you would see is over 90% of the kids in Aledo participating in something outside of school. Now that might be athletics, it might be art, it might be gymnastics, Boy Scouts, 4-H, music, you name it. Over 90% of kids participate in something outside of school. When you take a low-income neighborhood or a low-income school, you see the exact opposite. So one example, about 3 miles from here in Monroe Elementary, over 96% of the kids don't participate in something outside of school. Almost the complete opposite. And so that's what we call the opportunity gap. Kids growing up in poverty simply do not have the same opportunities that others do. And so as a Christian organization, 180, what we do is we provide those opportunities free of cost for those kids right in the neighborhood. That could be baseball or golf, basketball, after-school programs like Quest for Christ. When I first became a Christian and started getting involved in church, one of the most common phrases I would hear was, the world went down the drain when they took Jesus out of the schools. But the simple fact is, for some reason, the church just stopped going into the schools, because we have a program called Quest for Christ, which our public school system allows us to meet inside the school buildings and recruit kids for. So every week, over 500 kids are meeting in our public schools right after school to learn about Jesus and everything that represents. We also have our Weston Initiative, which meets on the weekends to simply provide a meal for kids growing up in poverty. We have in-school food pantries, school support, all different types of things within Prevent. Over 1,500 kids and their families we're able to reach every month through our Prevent initiatives. The second thing is reach. This is neighborhood outreach. If you guys are familiar with Davenport, we are located on 6th and Marquette Street. That is our main campus. It used to be the old St. Joseph Catholic campus. We bought a city block there in 2016. This is a tough neighborhood. It has the highest crime rates and highest poverty rates between South Chicago and East St. Louis. So simply put, it's a difficult neighborhood. But we believe that if we're going to see a neighborhood change, you have to do it from the inside out. And so we have focused a lot of our reach efforts right there in that neighborhood. And we're starting to see that change. We do things like community cleanups. So like October 1st, I think this upcoming Friday is our next community cleanup, where we just gather people from the Quad Cities and we simply walk the streets of our neighborhood and we pick up trash. It doesn't sound very attractive, but it's those simple things that really impact a community. The third thing that we do, this is develop. This is our residential program. This is probably how we started, and I'll talk to you a little bit about how we did that. But our develop program is broken down to 3 categories. Our residential program, which is 14 months long. We take men and women who really want to change, who are coming out of maybe domestic abuse or sex trafficking survivors or addiction, coming out of incarceration, homelessness, whatever the situation, and we house them for 14 months. It's a very structured program. They actually work for us for the first 6 months. We have businesses that we've entrepreneured within our program to train them and teach them different skills and trades, which will increase their success rate in the future. Our residential program has a 91% success rate of our graduates, which means 91% of the people who make it to graduation will be successful long term. It also has over a 70% retention rate, which means 7 out of 10 people who come into the program will complete the program. These are very high success rates. Now, there's a lot of reasons why. One is because we are a Christian organization. We have Bible studies. They have 25 hours of classes that they go through every week. Part of it's the career training program. A large part of it is because we use mentors from the community who volunteer, who mentor our men and women who are going through our residential program. Another reason why it's successful is because of our stability housing. These are houses within our neighborhood that we've purchased and we've renovated that will offer long-term housing for our men and women. Our third part is our affordable housing. When you look at low-income neighborhoods, one of the biggest issues is home ownership. Now, when my wife and I got married, we moved to an apartment here in Moline. And just to be honest, we weren't too concerned about the neighbors or maybe a piece of trash sitting on the sidewalk, just to be real with you guys, because we didn't take much ownership in the community because we knew we were only going to be there for a year or two. And then when we moved out into Coal Valley, into our neighborhood, we take a lot more ownership, meaning, if a car comes down the road and we don't recognize it, we're like, what are you doing in our neighborhood? Like, you have a different sense of ownership. When there's garbage on the street, we're going to pick it up. There's ownership. So when you take a low-income neighborhood, like Madison Elementary in Davenport, over 90% of the families there rent. Only 10% own their homes or working towards home ownership. In a healthy community, you need to have 60 to 70% at the minimum home ownership. And so one of the leading issues to communities that are struggling like ours is a very low home ownership rate. And so we have a program that we pioneered a few years where we take these abandoned buildings in our community, we renovate them utilizing our enterprises, our residential program I discussed earlier, and then we sell them to families who typically couldn't get a loan. And we do that by holding the mortgage ourselves. So they pay $500 a month, everything included, and within 10 years of paying that monthly rate, they can buy that house for $500, 100% debt-free. And so you create instant home ownership. And so as an organization, we're looking on how do we solve those long-term challenges of poverty in our community, and that's one of our focuses. We use over 350 volunteers a month within 180. That's a lot of volunteers, and so a great question is, why are people attracted to 180? I don't believe people volunteer with 180 because of what we do. I believe they volunteer with 180 because of why we do what we do. And that's one of the things that I want to talk about just briefly. August 28th, 1963, Dr. Martin Luther King took the stage where he spoke to hundreds of thousands of people, a speech that we all know very well. People didn't show up that day because they wanted to listen to a speech about what they were going to do. They showed up that day because they believed in why, and that why is very important. My why started in 2008 when I found myself in jail. Now, I had a pretty normal upbringing. I grew up in church, a pretty legalistic church, if I'm honest. I didn't hear about God's grace. And so by the time I got in high school, I made a lot of bad decisions that led to addiction. And in 2007, addiction literally destroyed my life. I became a homeless junkie. That's what I was. And then I ended up in jail, where I was looking at 14 years in prison. I had a child on the way during that time as well. When I was in jail, there was a gentleman named Merle who had come in with the Gideons, if you ever heard of the Gideons. Merle was in his 90s. I was typically the only one who would go to his class on Sundays. I was there for a year. I'd go every Sunday, and I was typically the only one. Just to be honest with you, Merle wasn't the most exciting speaker in the world. He would literally fall asleep while he was talking to me. Seriously, we would just be having a one-on-one conversation, and pretty soon he'd fall asleep. I don't know if it was medication, old age, I don't know. But it was never what Merle really said to me that made a huge difference in my life. It's what he did. And by him showing up there every Sunday, no matter rain, shine, snow, no matter how he felt, he was there every Sunday. And number one, it showed me God's grace, something I didn't know about. It showed me that God could forgive Rusty Boruff for all the things I had done in my life. But the most important thing was it showed me that someone believed in Rusty Boruff. And that's what I needed in that moment in my life. Excuse me. The second thing that I needed in jail was my mom. Sounds silly, but my mom, who is a very strong Christian, sent me a scripture when I was in jail. So I was in cell 121. I don't know how she got this, only mom could do this, but it was C-121 is what they called it, cell 121. And she sent me a scripture out of Colossians 1:21, C-121, I don't know. But it works. That scripture says, "You yourselves are a case study of what he does. At one time you all had your backs turned on God, thinking rebellious thoughts of him, giving him trouble every chance you got. But now by giving himself completely at the cross and actually dying for you, Christ brought you over to God's side and put your life together, whole and holy in his presence. And you don't walk away from a gift like that." You see, Merle gave me the hope I desperately needed, but this verse gave me my why. And I needed a why. I needed a reason to change my life or to let Jesus change my life. And I wanted my life to be a case study for God's grace and love. And when you look at 180, simply put, that's the goal of 180. A lot of people think 180 started just to help others. That's not why I started 180. Now, of course, that was a byproduct, but really, I started 180 to help people figure out their why. Because I'm a true believer that if we figure out why we exist in this earth, it helps us overcome those things that we're facing in life, such as addiction or homelessness or depression or mental health or anxiety, whatever it is. And so there's a lot of ways that people can get connected to 180. When you look at Prevent, we need people who are willing to go into our schools and to volunteer with a program like Quest for Christ. We need people who are willing to teach baseball to kids who never would have the opportunity, or basketball. We need people to serve in our in-school food pantries. When you look at Reach, we need people on October 1st to come help pick up garbage with us in our neighborhood, because those things are vital. We need men and women within Develop who are willing to go in and mentor men and women who are going through crisis in their situation. And so, what I would leave you today with is, if you're struggling maybe finding your why, Matthew 25 says that if we want to know Jesus more, if we truly want to experience Jesus, then we need to be serving alongside that person, or serving that person who is sick or homeless or naked or hungry in our community. And so even as a church, if you're wondering what your why is, I would encourage you guys to get involved. It doesn't have to be with an organization like 180. There's tons of great organizations in this community. But I would urge you to get involved and to figure out that why. So thank you, guys. I would like to open it up for questions, if that's okay. If anyone has a question, whether it be something maybe personal about my story, or maybe it be something about 180 or how you can get involved, I would love to take any questions that you guys might have. Yes, ma'am.
Say, I don't have a question, I just want to make a statement in that my son recently spent a day with probably a very well-acquainted man that you know, Tom McGee. And he has been a 180 for my son, and they just spent that day together maybe a week or two ago. They went up to Maquoketa, then Dubuque, and over 20, nothing back down, and it was a joyous day for my son. He so enjoyed it, and I enjoyed hearing about
Good.
Tom McGee again. He's
Yeah.
been missing for many years, growing, and
Yeah.
my son moving from one area, he living in another, and it was just very wonderful for me to know that they had spent the day together.
Awesome.
I thank Tom McGee.
I'm glad you shared that. Tom is one of our mentors, and he's a mentor to me too. So I'm glad you shared that. Thank you.
Rusty,
Yeah.
one of our biggest assets is our building. Do you do anything on the Illinois side, like an aftercare program or something that we could help with?
Yeah, we do stuff on the Illinois side, and that's something that we're also focusing on venturing out over. Actually, we had started in 2020, and then COVID. But in 2020, we started our efforts on how do we expand more into the Illinois side, which is actually where we started. So yeah, I think there could definitely be some opportunities for that. And you guys do. I had a great tour of this building. You have great space here. So space is something that's always needed. And yeah, I think there could definitely be some opportunities for something like that.
Are you on social media?
Yes, we are. So our website is 180.org, and that's spelled out. Or else you can go to just look up 180 on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or all the other ones that they have. And that's a great way to keep up with everything that's going on, whether it's volunteer opportunities. So another volunteer opportunity next Friday, also October 1st. We purchase a building. We have about 30 properties all within walking distance of our main campus. We've invested over $10 million in bricks and mortar in that community, really investing financially there as well. But a new building we're buying is a 7-plex in that community for women who graduate our program who are working on custody of their kids. One of the toughest things about this is when we have women who go through our 14-month program who are now working on getting joint custody of their kids or full custody in some situations. They need accountable housing, which is what we call our affordable housing, or our stability housing. And so this 7-plex will give them an opportunity, because it's 2- and 3-bedroom homes, where they can move in, they can have their kids on the weekends. And so, but that property has not been well taken care of. If you guys are green thumbers, Carolyn, who like to get their hands dirty, pull weeds, and get this property into shape, that is an example what you would see on our social media. You would see a post from us saying, hey, on this date, this time, we need volunteers to help us get this property ready so we can move in some women and their kids.
Is that the October 1st announcement?
That is the October 1st. So I know some of you guys were interested in our dinner fundraiser. We canceled that with our COVID concerns and everyone's health. And so October 1st and the following weeks, you'll see us talk about this 7-plex, which is the only facility like it here in the Quad Cities that would allow this for women and their kids. And it's a very large facility. It's a very large undertaking for us as an organization. And there's definitely going to be a lot of sweat equity as well in getting this place ready.
Thank you.
Any other questions that you guys have? Yes, that's a question we get often. So yeah, we built the first tiny houses here really in the Midwest, and it took us 3 years to build a 400 square foot facility. There's a lot of city codes and a lot of red tape when you go to build something that's never been built before. And so that was a big accomplishment for us, even though it was a small place. But those tiny homes, and we will be building more of them here in the Quad Cities, will house veterans who have gone through our program. We have a lot of veterans that are struggling with PTSD and different addictions, homelessness. They go through our 14-month program, and they need long-term housing opportunities. And so that's what those tiny homes will allow for. And so we built 2 of them so far, and we expect to build more once we finish this housing for women and children. It's a good question.
How did you come up with the name 180?
You know, I wish I had a really cool story for that. I don't. When I started 180, we didn't have a name. And so we were in Moline on River Drive. We had a house, and we were housing 3 or 4 guys in that. I lived in that house myself. I had a job to help pay for the bills. And eventually it started to grow, and more people were wanting into that house. And we needed a nonprofit. And I didn't know anything about that. And so a pastor called me and he said, hey, I have a nonprofit. It was an old youth group we had that we closed down. It's called the 180 Zone. I don't want the nonprofit anymore. Do you want it? And so he gave us the nonprofit, and that's how we got the name the 180 Zone legally. And then we changed that to 180 a few years later. So it's not a cool story, but it works, you know, of seeing people's lives or communities do a 180. So.
Now you work with a school in the area, did you say?
Yeah, we mostly in Davenport schools is our focus right now. Like I said, we've worked with Moline and East Moline schools, and then also the Silvis elementaries as well, on efforts on how can we take the model that we've created in Iowa and bring that onto the Illinois side. But right now, most of the focus is in that specific neighborhood of 6 and Marquette Street, in the 3 elementary schools, and the 1 intermediate school in that neighborhood. Anything else? Well, again, I want to thank you guys so much for inviting me here and letting me share the pulpit. I don't take that lightly. And if you guys do ever have questions or want to get connected, as I said, you can look up 180 on the internet, or you can give us a call. Or I'm sure you can talk to Carolyn or Denny as well, and they can get a hold of me. But again, thank you guys very much for your prayers and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Wesley.
I can come back anytime you want.
That's right. Amen to that. You know, I was sitting here.
You know, when
Go ahead.
the miracle of recovering from the stroke was, God wasn't done with you. You have a lot of work left to do, and God kicked you right back. And
She
said, "Not yet."
took my part, and I love it. Because that's what we do here at Bethel Wesley. I was sitting there. I was sitting there watching Rusty, and one of the things that sometimes the board of ministry talks about is how we don't take opportunity to recognize young people who might be gifted enough to pastor, to preach. He was raw, he was good, and he shared. And I was sitting there almost in tears because I'm so happy today. Thank you, Carolyn and Denny, for this invitation, and thank you, Rusty. He took the tour of the building with me. I don't know how good I did, but I did the best I could. So I'm thankful, and I'm humble behind his ministry, and I'm humble behind his testimony. And like Carolyn, I was sitting there thinking, when God has something for you to do, nothing and nobody can block it. Nothing and no one. I was a cousin of mine. I've had deaths all in my family, and I sent them a memorial to Chicago, and I simply said that even in death, family, we're reminded of God's love because he has promised to never leave us, to always be with us. And so that's my prayer for you this day.